didn't get to be baptized there. We moved, we lived right behind which is now Whitley East School. It's Poplar Creek Elementary School. And that's where I grew up. And my dad was janitor there for 19 years. And I came from a family that worked really hard, but he enjoyed doing what he did. And he taught me, if you're going to do a job, do it good. Do a good job. Don't just do it just to be doing it. A lot of people go to work every day and they may not like what they do. And they just show up for a paycheck or whatever. My dad sure didn't make a lot of money, but he enjoyed what he did. And when he planted a garden or anything, they weren't the type of parents that were constantly saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, and hug your neck. But they showed you love. And they showed love by, he would plant huge gardens, and I've seen him give, 3/4 of the way to people. And he enjoyed that. It made him proud, that he didn't have a lot material-wise to give people and financial-wise to give people, but he could give them something that his blood, sweat, and tears was in. I remember that my mother, another thing about when people would visit, people would come by and visit, a lot more people do today. And anyways, and my mom, she wouldn't let you leave without eating. You had to eat. You always had to eat. Charles was the skinny guy and I met him. And I think that's where his problems began. We moved the summer between my 6th grade and 7th grade year from Poplar Creek to the north end of Mud Creek, which is Lott, which is only a few miles from Jellicoe. And we started attending. We never missed a beat going to church. Now, as far as driving back to Beach Bottom, we didn't because that was just too far. And so my dad decided we'd visit Boston Baptist Church. So we went to Boston Baptist Church, and we loved it there. And I don't exactly remember who was a pastor at that time when we first went. I do remember that summer, Tony Christian, who's been here to preach before, who I consider kind of a brother to me, his family had moved up here from Florida, and they built a house right beside of their house, and his dad is actually the preacher who baptized me. And he wasn't the pastor there at the time, but he was going to church there, and I was comfortable with him baptizing me, so I was baptized behind J.L. Cooper's car lot, if you know where that's at in the south end of the county. Then, of course, I went to middle school. I'm going to skip a few years in between here. Horace Barton eventually became the pastor there, and I thought the world of Horace. And he later married me and Gerald. And I have to tell you this kind of funny story too. I went to him to high school, and I said, Horace, will you marry me? And he said, I have to wait and ask my wife, Phyllis. He said, if everyone's okay with it, he said, we'll see what we can do. And I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit there. When we moved, since we were so close to Jellicoe, actually I had friends in Jellicoe, as many friends in Jellicoe as I had in Whitley County. That's where actually I met Jada at. Is back then, if you were off for snow or whatever, and you were out of school, you could actually go to another school. They won't let you do that now. But I had a good friend that lived not far from me, John Crawford. And anyways, Jellicoe was having school, Whitley County was off, and I went to school with Johnny Crawford. I think I was like a sophomore in high school, and he was younger than me. But I remember that's where I met a lot of people from Jellicoe and became friends with them. When I was a sophomore in high school, I wanted a car when I, got my license and everything. And my dad, they didn't have the money, they didn't have the money to get me a car or anything. And I had to work for that. And that's just unheard of for a lot of kids today, But I worked 2 jobs because I was determined I wanted a Mustang. And I had it right down to that's exactly what I want. And it was just unheard of. And so my brother-in-law, he said, why don't you come to Cincinnati? And he said, we'll find you a car. Notice he didn't say a Mustang, he said, we'll find you a car. And so my dad took me to Jellicoe and put me on a Greyhound bus. And I was a sophomore in high school. And I rode to Cincinnati. I had never been that far by myself. And I rode that bus from Cincinnati, or from Jellicoe to Cincinnati. And my brother-in-law was waiting on me, and I was a nervous wreck. Because every time they stopped for a bathroom break or to get refreshments or whatever, I was afraid to get off the bus. Because I was afraid I'd get on the wrong bus, and I'd end up someplace else, and I didn't know anybody. But anyways, I come home at the end of that summer with a 1974 pea green Mustang. And I loved it. It had an 8-track player in it, and I burned up, Eagles and Sticks and Foreigner and Bob Seger and Silver Bullet back then. Well, I don't even know who they are, but they were great back then. But anyways, it was an ugly car, but it was hot, because that's what I wanted, is that Mustang. And this is how the Lord blessed me with that little car too, because years later, when me and Joel got married, we kept that car, and I've heard him talk about that little car since we've been here at church too. We kept it the whole first year, and it quit on the lot the day that he traded it in. So I have to say the Lord blessed me with that lovely little car. In high school, one of my best friends was Eddie Landon, and Eddie and his family have been here at church, and Eddie, he plays piano, Jennifer and Allison's son, and they're really, really good friends of mine. And but anyways, Eddie's last name was Landon, and so was mine, but we weren't related, but we were close enough for him to be my brother. So a lot of times in high school, we would tell people that, just to aggravate them. Eddie would say, "This is my little sister Phyllis," and everybody would look and think, "Well, y'all in the same class, who got held back and whatnot." And we used to joke around with them, things like that all the time. But around prom time, I had a boyfriend, imagine that, from Jellicoe, and he's supposed to take me to the prom, and I had my dress and everything, and he was kind of a player, and I didn't know it, but I found out, and so he kind of let me down about a month before the prom, and so I didn't have a date for the prom, and Eddie, being like my brother, he felt sorry for me. And he said, "Listen," he said, I got a really good friend from Williamsburg." And that was it. In 1980, it's not like it is today. Williamsburg and Whitley County was bad, real bad. I mean, we didn't want to be in the same restaurant, let alone the same high school, anything with people from Williamsburg. And I think Williamsburg and Jellicoe were worse than Williamsburg and Whitley County at that time. I mean, it was bad. And that was the first mistake when he said he's from Williamsburg. I just looked at him and I said, "You gotta be kidding." And I said, "Is there nobody else?" But he happened to go to church with Gerald, and so because he said his name, I knew him because he had sort of dated a real good friend of mine. So I knew who he was. I wasn't impressed with him, but I knew who he was. And anyways, I said, "Well, when are you going to see your friend from Williamsburg?" He said, "Tonight." He said, "Night at church." This was a Thursday. They had church on Thursday nights. And I said, "Well, you can ask it." I said, whatever. So I really didn't think a whole lot about it the rest of that night or whatever. I mean, it wasn't like I was losing sleep over it or anything, because I was still mad at the boyfriend from Jellicoe, and I just knew that he was going to come to his senses, and he was going to call me and say, "Hey, I made a really big mistake. Please forgive me." Not the Jason Crabb version, but anyways, Eddie came back the next day and didn't say anything, in class, and I thought, well, I'm not bringing it up. I don't care. Anyways, it's Williamsburg, I don't really care. And so the Saturday goes by, Sunday goes by, and Monday, my curiosity, my other fellow from Jellicoe, it was obvious he wasn't going to call me, by then. He'd already ripped my heart out, and I was done with the Jellicoe folks, other than I love Jada. But anyway, so Eddie comes back on Monday, and I said, "Well, what'd you find out?" And he said, "He's already got a date, Phyllis." And I said, "Told you." I said, "That's the way those players in Williamsburg work." And he said, "That's what you said about the guys from Jellicoe." And anyways, he said, No. He said, "He's a super nice guy, Phyllis." He said, "The situation is that he's so nice that this other person that he'd already asked to the prom, he couldn't go back on his word and tell her no. He's a real gentleman. He's a true gentleman." And I said, yeah, right, you know. And so I went on to the prom by myself. And thank goodness I had rowdy friends back then.